My grandfather was from a Haredi background, but with a Mizrahi flair. He didn't belong to Agudat Israel, who would easily be part of the Mizrahi group, and that had much influence on my father. On the other hand, my grandfather studied in the most famous Lita yeshivas. He was in Tels, headed by Rabbi Lezer Gordon, and when my father was in the fifth shiur, the highest shiur, then the rabbi of the fourth shiur was Rabbi Shimon Shkop, who later became the head of the famous yeshiva of Grodna. And he and Rab Chaim both invented special genius ways of studying Talmud. Rab Chaim is very known about his shita, and also Rab Shimon. So my grandfather also was a friend with Rab Shimon, even though Rab Shimon was more elderly than him. And and then afterwards, my grandfather had correspondence with Rab Shimon, and he wrote to Rab Shimon, "My rabbi, you are my rabbi," and Rab Shimon told him, "No, you are my friend. No, I'm not your rabbi." And afterwards, my grandfather studied at Rab Chaim's place in Brisk, together with his sons, Rab Moshe Soloveitchik and Rab Velvele, and Ilui Mimechit and other people. And my father and my grandfather also received a smiche from the Oruch HaShulchan, Rabbi Chaim Michael Tikuchinsky, in Novardok. So he had to do with all these famous people. And he was also a friend of Rabbi Elchonon Wasserman, the Kovetz Shiurim, Kovetz He'arot. Even though he was a stronger Gudenik, but he was a good friend of my grandfather. And then
from Baranovich. Rabbi Elchanan was from Baranovich.
Yes, from Baranovich, right, exactly. And when my grandfather wrote this third of his 8 Torah books, he put into it a letter which he wrote probably right after World War II to my father, who was then in London on a mission from America. And here are the stories which I told you before, about Rabbi Mibrisk, and about Rabbi Eliezer Yehuda Finkel, and about the British Consul MacPherson. And I think these 2 pages are worth of being photocopied and shown. Also, my grandfather was also in Israel. He came to Israel before the war with his wife, and he lived at first in Bnei Brak, and he was davening together with Chazon Ish and with Rabbi Kahanman from the Polish Yeshiva. So on Shabbos there was a droshe. 1 week the Chazon Ish gave a droshe, the other week Rabbi Kahanman gave a droshe, and the third week my grandfather gave the droshe. In every 3 weeks it was distributed between them. As you see, my grandfather was very immersed with all the Haredi high leaders, but he himself was a Mizrachinik. There was also a story that my grandfather was for a short while rabbi of some town in Belarus. So it was many years after my grandfather studied at Rab Chaim in Brisk, maybe 5-7 years after. And Rab Chaim was a Gudenik, and he thought that my grandfather's also. So he wrote a postcard to my grandfather and asked him, "Don't let the Mizrahi enter your city." He didn't know that my grandfather himself was a Mizrachinik.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You come from a very illustrious family. A very kosher, illustrious family.
Yes, we also went, my father and my grandfather and grandmother went also once to a dache. Dache is a kind of resort house in the summer together with Reb Chaim. And he didn't want to wash his hands first. So, and he was the most important man, the Reb Chaim Mibrisk. So they asked him why don't he said something which I think appears in the Gemara too. Why should I wash first and then have to wait till all of you wash?
Sure. So I know your grandfather must have been very proud of his son, what he achieved.
Yeah, you can read here.
How he saved Yidden, how he saved...
Yes, all the time he asked us to come to Israel already. But in the war, it was very hard. And 2 years after the war, we came. I remember my grandfather well. He died only in 1966. He was also a friend of Rabbi Cheskel Sarne, the Hebron Rosh Yeshiva. And Rabbi Cheskel Sarne lamented him in the Devoya. I gave an hesped about my grandfather.
And where is he? Where's his kever? Where's he?
His kever is in Sanhedria Haishana. And then my father also there, my mother also there, and my grandmother also there, and my mother's brother also there, and Rabbi Ovadia Yosef also there.
Wow. So it's amazing. You know, I just want to end off, and Emanuel, I really want to thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Because it's...
So I don't have
there are no words
time
to describe. There really are no words to describe how grateful we are for your family, how they really did change Jewish history. There's a saying, we hear that if you save the life of one person, it's as if you've saved the entire
Kol
world.
hamatzil nefesh achat. You know, there are two versions.
I know, but it's still... And then there's a Japanese proverb, a very beautiful Japanese proverb, that even a hunter cannot kill a bird that comes to him for refuge.
That's also nice.
It's a very beautiful proverb, but I think your influence that your father had with Sugihara, asking for the visas, really did change Jewish history and saved the Mir Yeshiva, had an instrumental, a pivotal role, a very important role in saving the Mir Yeshiva, which saved Yiddishkeit, because from the ashes of Europe, from the
and
total
it continued
destruction.
to Shanghai. My father also arranged the permission to go to Shanghai afterwards.
And then part of the Mir went to America and reignited Yiddishkeit in America and came here to Yerushalayim, and today the Mir is the most important yeshiva. And the Torah that's learnt in the Mir, well, the schut from the Torah should be, Bezrat Hashem, it should be a blessing for your family, and may your father's memory be for eternal blessing. And thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. I think you're doing a very important thing. I myself should have done it, but I'm busy with my PhD. When I end, I hope also to be much more involved, and maybe we will renew our connections.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, I'm holding the book named Chidushei Yerucham al HaRambam. Yerucham is my grandfather, father of Dr. Zorach Warhaftig, Yerucham Asher, and my grandfather has written 8 Torah books, Chidushei Torah books. This is the 3rd one, which was published in 1945. And in this book, my grandfather brings a letter which he had written to my father, who was then in London after the war, in one of the 3 missions he had to the, how do you call the Akurim, Machanot Akurim, to the camps of the Jews who remained after the war.
Displaced, the deep camps, displaced.
So there are several more very interesting things. One of them is that my father writes to my son that the הגאון האמיתי, Rabbi Eliezer Yudah Finkel Shlita, the ראש הישיבה של אדמיר, he was sitting in Kaidan and giving a shir to the Talmidim, and suddenly a young man came into him and it started crying, shouting, "Why are you sitting here? Do you want Chas v'Shalom to be killed by the killers, by the Nazis?" So the rabbi said, "Who are you?" So he said, "I'm Zohar Warhaftig, and I have come intentionally from Kovna to try to arouse you to leave this place of danger, Lithuania." So he asked my father, he asked Dr. Warhaftig, "How do we do that?" So Dr. Warhaftig said, "I will arrange everything." And that's what happened, and my father and Dr. Warhaftig saved the Gaon Rab Finkel and his yeshiva. And then my grandfather says that this story was like, in Hebrew you say shemen ba'atzamot, oil in the bones. That means something very pleasant and wonderful. The story how my grandfather's son, my father, succeeded in saving the Mire Yeshiva, and also many other rabbis and the yeshivot, without asking to which party do you belong and politically looking. No. And another thing, my grandfather says that another story was told to him by Rabbi Ze'ev Shlita Abad the Bris, that's Rav Velvele. Rav Velvele came to Kovna, I also didn't remember that, with his sons to help in evacuating Lithuania. And then he wanted to come to my father to help him. But he couldn't come in because always there was a big line before my father's room. Many people came to ask help from my father. So Rav Velvele called my father and said, "Zorach Yakiri, you know me." Of course he knows. He was studied a whole summer at Rav Velvele, with Rav Velvele. "I'm the Rav of Brisk and I can't reach you." So my father said, "You stay where you are. I leave everything for a while and I'm coming to you." He was his rabbi. He was my father's rabbi for a whole summer, 20 years before.
This was in Warsaw?
No, this story was in Kovna.
He was his rabbi in Warsaw?
In Warsaw, a whole summer. And then my father came and helped him and arranged everything for him and for the family. I don't know if the Brisker Rov came through Japan. I think my father arranged to him through Turkey. I'm not sure. But Rabbi Aaron Kotler, you know.
Sure.
My father saved him through Japan. And once my father, the train from Kobe to Yokohama, Tokyo, took 12 hours. So my father, we lived in Tokyo, in Yokohama, but my father had to go all the time to the Jews to arrange things. So once my father went 12 hours to Kobe, and then 12 hours back to Yokohama, and then he received a telegram that a famous rabbi has arrived from Lithuania, maybe Rabbi Aaron Kotler. So my father immediately went again 12 hours. And when we came in 96, this is called the bullet train. It took us only 3.5 hours from Kobe to Yokohama. So my father helped him, and there's a third story about the British consul Macpherson, who became my father's personal friend, and he helped very much in hundreds, I think thousands of visas, not to Japan. This is another story. It's also written in much detail in the book. I suggest you read it. But here is also written about it. it was already after the British consulate in Kovna was closed by the Soviets. So you know what he did? He left my father a big
Blank.
a big parcel of blanks with it was already even after he couldn't even sign, because he signed as much as he could and then he had to go away. So my father found Jews who knew how to forge these things, and they succeeded in saving another hundreds of Jews with these.
And this was from the British consul.
And it was in his agreement of the British consul, Macpherson.
He was a consul in Kovna as well, in Kaunas.
Yes. That means that there were also British good people. But here it's written much more in detail in the book. But I'm telling you what is written here.
So this part is not very well known. This part of this very important part of our history is not very well known.
This is not known. Maybe when I finish the PhD, maybe I will enter it. I think you should. There is. Okay.
Emanuel, I really would like to thank you so very much for giving of your very valuable time. You're studying for your PhD, and here you relating what your father, the deeds of your father, what he did to save thousands and thousands. Even saving one person in itself is like saving the world. And your father managed to save more than one person. He saved thousands. And his memory should be for a blessing. And I just want to thank you really so much.
I want also to say one more word about my mother. When they left Warsaw, ran away from Warsaw, my mother was pregnant with me, and at the beginning they had thought that she would stay. Maybe something will happen for good, they will be able to go back to Warsaw. But at the last minute my mother said to my father, "I'm not leaving you," took a toothbrush and came. And that's why you see me here.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
I'd like you to put it in the movie, this anecdote.
We will for sure.